very pleased to be welcoming a spotlight speaker here to speak about building information highways for growth in India and the world. Please do welcome the founder and chairman, Bharti Enterprise, Sunil Bharti Mittal. Thanks for coming along.
My pleasure.
So let's start off, first of all, in a country with 1 billion mobile connections, rapid digitalization, leading a telecoms business must be exciting, to say the least. You've also seen this sector grow from its infancy around 25 years ago to where it is now. And you've been involved in telecom markets around the world. So what do you think the biggest single factor is now that differentiates the India digitalization story from any other?
Well, India has had absence of infrastructure, as you know, unlike Western countries where you had a lot of building blocks over the last century, decades. India had to suddenly wake up to digital wave in the absence of physical infrastructure. And I think the policymakers, the politicians realized very earlier on that in the absence of hard infrastructure, which takes long years and lots of investment, the digital medium would perhaps be able to mitigate the years of shortage of hard infrastructure. And frankly, I think that was the reason why India suddenly opened up to foreign investment, going up to nearly 100% now FDI, and unleashing the digital medium in the country. And before we kind of walked into this space, the IT industry had already started to make its presence felt in India. It was one of the most unregulated industry in a country which had a lot of regulations. Their success was sort of pushing through the government to take bolder steps. And when telecom got delicensed into the hands of private sector, way back in 92, 93, some of us brave at that time ventured into it and built the digital, I would say, ecosystem. And then come Prime Minister Modi in 2014, he took digital as one of his key pillars, one of the 4 pillars on which he wanted to build India's growth. And in the last 6, 7, 8 years under his regime, I would say things have accelerated to a point where today Indians are enjoying 16, 17, 18 gigabytes of data a month, which is the highest level of consumption anywhere in the world, at $2 a month. It's one of the cheapest way of including the society into the main digital stream. Fintech is riding on it, e-commerce is riding on it, pharmacies are riding on it. Importantly, medical education in villages and deep rural areas is riding on this highway now. So in my mind, this has been an unbelievable success story from the days when you couldn't get a phone connection for 10 or 12 years to people being chased to buy from one or the other competitors. And as you rightly said, 1 billion people are now connected. And that's a very powerful, ecosystem for anything else to follow. If there wouldn't have been all this in the last 10, 15, 20 years, you wouldn't have had the e-commerce revolution, you wouldn't have had the digital revolution. So I feel that India has taken the right steps here.
It's interesting, that pricing question. In fact, the last time I was in India, people were sort of falling over themselves to share their hotspot with me in a way that certainly doesn't happen in the UK. But we're going to hear a little while from Nick Reed about the challenges that Vodafone has faced in India over the years. And one of the things that he mentioned to me in the interview was that pricing question and about whether it made it possible for governments, or for companies to be able to innovate enough when prices were so low. So I wonder if you have a similar thought on that.
Well, India has always been uniquely placed in terms of pricing. But where the pricing went down to a period of time where it was free for everyone, became obviously unsustainable for any company, including mine. And there was a period when stock prices had taken a hit, the cash flows were under huge pressure. And the question was not if, but when will most of the companies start to fold up. And the fact is 9 or 10 operators did pack up. The mighty Tatas, we are sitting in the hotels, they lost $10 billion, wrote it off and merged their company for nothing with us. Vodafone has written off $20 billion, merged with Idea, still struggling, and Nick will probably talk more about that. And many others, Telenor, Videocon, several of others companies, such as Aircel, Arcom, folded because there was a force out there which was trying to use its very strong execution power, regulatory, overreach, I would say, and the strength of their balance sheet to position themselves in the market to pick up a big market share. So it's been brutal for 5 years. And the price used to be about $3 before this competitor came in, and it went down to about $1. It's come back to $2 now. And I would say if it gets back to $3 in the near term, that will start to give some health back to the industry. Eventually, I would say we need to get to $4. It'll still be by far the cheapest anywhere in the world. But do keep in mind that before 2016, when the new competitor came in, people were spending about $3 for less than 1 GB a month. All we are saying is $3 to $4 for 16, 18, 20 gigabytes a month. Enjoy as much data as you want, but do pay a little bit. The beauty of the Indian pricing will still remain is that at the lower end, where people really can't afford to pay too much money, and India is price sensitive, it may look like here, what's $4? The fact is there are people out there, it's hard for them to do $1.50 a month for mobile telephony. So the lower end would probably be 100 rupees a month, which is a pound, a buck, and going up to 3 pounds, let's say, for the upper end. So pricing will be low, but yes, I think Nick will again speak about that. Pricing needs to repair. This industry is very heavily capital intensive industry. You spend ton load of money just to be in the same position. I mean, you sometimes feel you're running, but you're on a treadmill, you're at the same place. My company spends $3 to $4 billion every year after year. There's not been absence of 1 year in the last 15 years at least, where you don't spend that money, $3 to $4 billion on new capital, for capacity, for coverage, importantly also for new technologies. 2G moving to 3G, 3 to 4G, and now 5G is upon us. And on top of that, you have to buy another big raw material for our industry, which is spectrum. That could go up from billion to 5-6 billion, depending on which year you're looking at. So this industry needs robust cash flows. I think the government has recognized it. The recent unveiling of the package to save Vodafone Idea is precisely in that direction, where India feels, at least the decision makers at the highest level, that if the telecom story gets compromised, there are lots of other parts of our economy which will get compromised.
One of the other challenges that Nick mentioned to me was the challenge around litigation, that it's a litigious society and that does provide risk and it poses barriers.
You know, telecom industry worldwide historically has been very litigious. And I still remember when I was entering telecom, this was 94, 95, when we rolled out our network. Steve Schaefer from Motorola told me at that time, mobile companies are nothing but law firms with an antenna. So I couldn't relate to it at that point in time, but today, looking back so many years, I think he was right. We spent so much money on litigation, it's unbelievable. And, our top lawyers charge 3 or 4 times what a very high quality Queen's Counsel charges here in this country. And India is not a first world country from economic point of view. Lawyers who used to be probably having small little incomes are today, having huge amounts of wealth on account of telecom litigation for the last 20 years. I hope and wish that litigation goes down.
So let's talk, you mentioned the recent reforms. Tell me more about what you think about the recent reforms from the Indian government.
Reforms always happens in any country, and we have seen this in India. When things get really difficult, then you start to see reforms coming through. Sometimes you wish they were done in time, so that a lot more could have been done through those reforms. But nevertheless, this has not come one day too late. Without this, Vodafone would have probably gone into Chapter 11 or bankruptcy, Indian bankruptcy code. My own view is that this was timely. There were 2 or 3 pillars of this package. One was deferring the liability. Liability because of some court actions and because of spectrum payments is very large for most of the companies remaining now. And that has been pushed by 4 years. And the interest on that deferment is being offered to the companies as a form of conversion into equity, should you desire to do so. So that takes away a lot of immediate cash flow. And importantly, I think you have now given Vodafone Idea a chance to repair themselves in 4 years and hopefully survive. The second part was on administrative reforms. Just my company, for example, has 16 warehouses. And when we say warehouses, they are very large warehouses where we store hundreds of millions of paper forms. This has been something we have been contesting for a long time. I'm giving you a small example. Has been done away with. You can digitize them, get out of the warehouses. The KYC process was very expensive, very cumbersome, has been completely simplified. Import licenses have been abolished. The definition of what should be charged as a regulatory charge on revenue has been clarified now for future. I wish it was done from previous times when we were hit on some extraordinary amounts of non-telecom revenue, but that's been fixed going forward. 80% of bank guarantees, which in our case is massive, tens of millions of dollars, have been sort of taken away. So a lot of reforms have happened in ease of doing business pillar. I think the third part is now the government will look at the industry to stop fighting and come to some sensible market principles so that the people who are playing in the market have an economic model to survive.
You've recently diversified into some new verticals, setting up a payments bank, investing heavily into data centers. So I wonder if you could tell me, is this a larger vision for Bharti Enterprise, and can you share what that vision is?
You know, financial inclusion has been a problem with most of the countries. I mean, I operate in countries where financial inclusion is really required. We don't have credit cards like with the Western world, so you need to find ways and means to get to those rural areas, bottom of the pyramid customers. Africa, we operate in 14 countries, the same problem. And the good news is Africa started to, walk on this a little earlier than even India. The M-Pesa story is very well known, and our own company, Airtel Money, in 14 countries is pushing through over $50 billion of cash and payments in those countries. In India, we are at $35 billion now. So the payment bank was a form of, it was an instrument to really provide financial inclusion. And while we were building this, a lot of fintech companies like Paytm and PhonePe and Google Pay and all also came on the horizon. So what we decided was we go into rural areas rather than being in the cities. We have city presence, but it's largely bottom of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. We have nearly 45 million active customers transacting every month. I am very hopeful. This is going to be a huge success story. It's in the making at the moment. Give it 2 or 3 years. This could be one of the most important instruments for financial inclusion in the country. On the data centers, I think as much as you can build, the demand is there. Every country is going for data localization. India, in any case, is a very large country. And with people consuming 16, 18, 20 gigabytes a month, with Google, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Indian apps, education, entertainment, everything needs to be stored in India now. Fintech, financial transactions. And for that, the demand on data center is huge now from the international companies. And we have been building data centers for a long time. We have one of the largest data centers in India in Pune. More are coming up. And so these are the two areas which we believe are adjacencies to our space of telecom, but fairly heavily connected. We have our own submarine cables, our own fiber networks, and that's all required to stitch this together.
How do you keep the data centers from being too carbon emitting?
I think that remains a huge issue. And frankly, data centers are power guzzlers. We do tap into solar energy. We had our own solar company, which we just sold to Adani's. It was one of the bigger solar companies. But by and large, work has to be on making data centers more efficient. The machines that go into data centers should be less power consuming. That's one factor. The other factor being go as much towards green as possible. The good news is the renewable energy pricing has come down dramatically in our country. So if we can get plugged into that part of the grid, we are always happy to do it. Right now, I would say it's far away from being neutral. But our other pieces, for example, nearly 250,000 towers, which used to consume a lot of power and diesel from generators, are moving onto the greener side much faster. But this will follow. And if India's dream of having 400 gigawatts of renewable energy is going to be in place, I think the problem will start to ease in any case. And now we're hearing about green hydrogen and a lot of new initiatives that are going to come through.
You have recently invested into OneWeb, and it marks a significant collaboration with the UK government. Tell me about OneWeb's potential and how you see the investment outlook in the UK in its post-Brexit journey.
You know, this is, I must explain the context here. UK was one of the leading spacefaring nation in the 60s, 70s. They were launching their own rockets at that time. They were early in the game. The world was, the US and USSR at that time were the only other two nations which were heavily into it. But once the EU came together and the ESA, the European Space Agency, became the focal point, I think at some point in time, UK just sort of gave it away. Most of the technologies that they had, including on the GPS, PNT, and other stuff, all went into under the ESA regime. And whether it was being done in France or other parts, it didn't matter at that time. Having pulled out of Europe through the Brexit process, I think suddenly the country finds itself so much far behind in the space arena. And I have to give it to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson here, that he saw this gap for UK's future. And when OneWeb came to his attention, very quickly moved and maneuvered to secure that asset for the UK, to become a catalyst for more activities in space. Last July in lockdown, a meeting was summoned where I was called in, and the discussion about OneWeb happened. I was a founder shareholder. I had then sold out and left the company. I was asked to lead the charge along with the UK government, and that's what we did. And OneWeb is now on its way to provide global services fairly soon. We are doing launches on a regular cadence every month. 35 to 36 satellites are being put up. We have now close to 375, 380 satellites in space. More are going every month, as I said. We'll complete the constellation by May, June next year. And every square inch of the world will have connectivity. Forests, deserts, peaks of Himalayas, oceans, in aircrafts, high speed, low latency telecom service. I call this a telecom network in space. And it's a very powerful medium. The LEO constellation holds great promise. What GEO at 36,000 kilometers away from Earth could not do in terms of speed and latency, these LEO constellations will do it. High speed, high throughput, low latency, and phenomenal capacity for those who really need it. The use cases are very solid. Rural broadband in any case. There are still 1.5 billion people who are not connected to internet. For many of you, there may be a surprise that large parts of this country, which is so advanced, still is not connected. We have tied up with British Telecom to go and reach those places. FCC just did a tender in the US, a $16 billion rural development opportunity fund tender as a reverse auction. I was surprised there are large parts of US which don't have any connectivity. We have recently been engaging with Alaska and the various tribal organizations in Alaska. I think the capacity in Alaska will be sold out anytime now. There's so much demand there. So there are large places. And then you go to Africa. Gosh, it's impossible to cover them for the next 20 years with a radio network. This is the way to go. Schools, hospitals in rural areas, critical installations, defense installations, maritime, of course. So this will have dual use cases. Military use cases, connecting the fighter jets in sky on real-time communication basis to that remotest part of the world where a small hamlet with 5 homes is needing internet. It will do that.
And by when, you said?
50-degree parallel, which is UK comes within that, and upwards is already ready now. The testing is going on, network is being stabilized. So I would say by December, 50-degree parallel will all be available. So Alaska gets covered, Greenland, Siberia, all the Arctic region, UK, Nordic countries. And then with every passing month, as more and more satellites go up, from 2, 3, 4 hours of connectivity in India today, we'll get to 7, 8 hours. By May, June next year, it'll be 24/7.
Extraordinary. Let's talk about India's investment climate in a post-COVID world versus other markets like China, like Bangladesh, Vietnam, or Brazil, among others. How do you compare it now?
India's economic situation?
Investment climate.
I think India has been very fortunate. For the last 10, 15 years, India has been drawing massive amounts of foreign direct investment. It's only accelerated in the last few years. And I would say now we should get this anti-China dividend in a bigger form. Many more conversations are going on in the boardrooms of how do you move away from China, at least partially, and create a second robust supply chain. India seems to be the only place which only can do that job at scale and importantly also give a local market. So I would say we are at $70-80 billion a year now. We should get into 3 digits of FDI very soon. The US corporations are looking at India, which was in fits and starts and small in volume. That is going to pick up, and once US moves, the numbers dramatically alter. India is wanting to sign treaty with the UK. I think those discussions are going on. It appears that we may have some early harvest kind of a treaty with the UK. US-India discussions are going on. My own view is India perhaps may become one of the most important investment destinations in the next 10 years. If people have followed here in this room, India is opening up its infrastructure. There's a massive divestment pipeline of public sector units which are coming regularly. Air India recently got privatized finally after long years of trying. It's in the hands of Tatas now. This will become a robust, strong airline. Shipping Corporation is on the block. Container Corporation is on the block. Many other businesses are there. So you are seeing massive amounts of private equity moving into India, and you are looking at strategic partners also coming to India. So I would say India could well become the best investment destination for the next 10, 15 years.
So associated with that, the economic outlook for India, you also think looks bright?
It is bright. I mean, of course, we are coming from a very low base of the pandemic. 9.5% is the prediction for this year, coming out of the low base. But I would say India could perhaps maintain its momentum of 8 to 9% year on year. And frankly, we need that. At least for the next 10 years, we need it. There are still people, 25 million people, who get 1 meal a day. So there's a lot of work to be done. More highways have to be built up, more infrastructure has to be built. So India needs that kind of growth. So, and my own view is it will get there. The worry that many of the Western countries have is, will India therefore create a lot more carbon footprint while doing so? I mean, there are two views around that. India will be responsible. My own view is, especially with this Prime Minister, he's very committed to climate issues. He's one of the main personalities at the climate summits. He'll be here in Glasgow in the next few days at COP26. I don't know what he has to say, but my own view is he'll make a big commitment in terms of India's responsible way of handling climate. Yet I feel India still needs equal but differentiated level of treatment. We need technologies on carbon capture and storage. We need a lot of more funds to ensure that we can have technologies and money to put towards lowering the climate or carbon footprint in the country. India consumes about half a barrel per capita of oil. That compares to 26 barrels per capita in the US, 4 barrels in China. And when it's our turn to grow at 9-10%, we just can't put a lid onto that to say, no, you can't use any coal. Coal will keep on going on down on a glide path. We are seeing that happening. Solar, wind power is gaining ground. Nuclear deal was signed in 2007, 2008. Unfortunately, there are still issues around the nuclear supply group. We have not been able to put any nuclear plants. And frankly, nuclear has become less and less fashionable now. And therefore, it will be more renewable, more green energies, hydrogen. And my own views will be fine.
So you've mentioned a few things there, the concerns around climate. You've mentioned financial inclusion, people who don't have enough to eat. I wonder what keeps you up at night?
No, I sleep well. But I try to create either new responsibilities or new excitements. Telecom has been a roller coaster. I can certainly call myself battle hardened. We have seen some very difficult times. At least 3 big battles in the marketplace in the last 20 odd years. But I think we are coming, hopefully, to an end of those wars in telecom in India. There are only 3 operators left for 1.3 billion people. Everybody should have a place under the sun to make a viable business. OneWeb is a new exciting project that I'm personally leading. I'm the executive chairman, but I'm spending considerable amount of time. I had to learn satellite. This is not my fundamental base of learning. And so, but it's exciting, it's good. We are now trying to plan the Gen 2 beyond the Generation 1, which will have lots more bells and whistles. We'll have more payloads, thermal imaging, surveillance, and plenty of other stuff that can go into it. What shape, size that satellite constellation will take. It's a lot of exciting stuff happening.
Thank you so much for coming into the India Global Forum here today and spending some time with us. Absolutely fascinating conversation here with the founder and chairman of Bharti Enterprise, Sunil Bharti Mittal. Thanks so much, and we are going to be back soon. Thank you.